Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say that our guest is Neil Miller. Neil is from the podcast Work Minus. Neil, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Richard. I am indeed a human, so I qualify to be on the show, right?
Absolutely. So, fellow podcaster, Neil, tell us a bit about Work Minus and the history and actually the name. That's an interesting one. Let's start there.
Work Minus is something we started about a year and a half ago. It was really a project to get into the minds of what's the zeitgeist around what people are talking about work. We knew that we're kind of at an age where we're trying to build new work structures, but we still have a lot of old stuff left over from the industrial age, from all sorts of things from white supremacy to command and control management that just really don't belong in the workplace anymore. So we wanted to examine what those things were. We've interviewed about 75 people now, really just trying to get their input, get their expertise on what's going on and what it is. And so we've identified themes that we like to talk about. But I think that the biggest thing for us with Work Minus, what it's become now, is we're big into technology. So we talk a lot about tech and how that impacts the workforce. But of course, the big looming threat is always everyone's talking about AI, talking about machine learning, automation, and how that's coming for everyone's jobs type things. So we've probably talked about 10 of our guests have been specifically on that topic. And no one feels like, okay, this threat is imminent, like it's going to happen in the next 5 years, that we're all going to be out of work. But everyone says we have some big decisions to make. We can't let our current path keep going as it is without being very cognizant of it and being aware of what's going on. And for us as a team with Work Minus, we took that as, okay, this is the time when we need to figure out how to be better humans at work. Because if we're really going to succeed, we can't compete with machines and with robots. We have to get really good at what we're good at. And so then we said, okay, well, what does that mean? So the rest of our show is all about trying to dive into what does it mean to be a good human at work? How do we pursue that, and how do we get better at that? So that's an overview of what we do.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd love to get into that theme of being a better human and so on. And maybe before we go there, let's talk a little bit about AI. So some of these threats aren't imminent, but what do you see as the sort of the current trends in terms of how it's encroaching into the workspace and interfacing with us at work?
I mean, anything that really can be automated on some level, I think should be for the sake of a business. In terms of tasks that are just kind of passing data back and forth between systems. Some people's jobs for a long time was just data transfer, data entry. Humans are really notoriously bad at that, and machines are really good at that, and they do it at a lot faster pace. So anything that has to do with data transfers is very quickly going to be moving in that sector. Really anything that has to do with process management, understanding how things move from one piece to another, that kind of transfer has to be automated. Lots of things in terms of banking. The fintech industry is being heavily automated at this point. A lot of customer service things, you're seeing more bots that you're interacting with, less actual agents unless it becomes an escalated issue. So in basically every area, you're seeing how we're starting to take these big steps. And I'd say we've been taking these steps for the last 100 years. Things have been given over to machines at some point, whether it be farming or other things. It's just starting to happen at a lot faster rate, and things we didn't expect to happen are starting to happen now in terms of decision making, not just brute force, like let a robot do that, but even intellectually it's taking over a lot of that work.
Right. And from those interviews, was there anything that shocked you? Or you were like, oh wow, that's a bit closer than I thought it was, or is that really going to happen?
There wasn't any specific example of things that was like, oh wow, I didn't expect that. But that's also because we stay pretty close to what's going on. It's almost, when you talk about AI, it's almost all seems to be in the future. But that's part of our human condition, is that we get used to things so quickly. Autonomous cars are still a novelty right now. In 5 years, it'll be like, hasn't it always been like this? Like we don't, it's hard for us to recognize as things change as quickly as they are right now. So in that way, I feel like we won't even recognize it whenever most of the tasks we do today aren't around anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a bet with my partner. We've got kids that are 2 years old. That they
Hmm.
won't ever learn to drive, or if they do,
Yeah.
they'll do it for fun, right, on private land. And so we have this bet, and it's pretty likely, right, by the time they get to in 15 years' time, it'll be here. Um,
Yeah, you'll need like a special permit just to drive because they don't want people to drive because that's a liability. I mean, insurance companies will shut down. Like they don't want any drivers on the road at that point.
exactly. And the thought that they'll think of us as being these kind of reckless, crazy people. You mean you drove your own car, you crazy cat?
And honestly, like when I'm out on the roads and I see people like on their phones driving, you think about drunk driving, you think about all sorts of stuff. It's almost like, yeah, that's probably true. It is kind of crazy to have humans that are distracted and all these things in charge of these machines.
Yeah. On the automated process thing, we had a couple of guests on who are from the lean manufacturing side, that Pop and Dirk's husband and wife, writers and thinkers in the lean space. And they were saying, cautioning against automating processes actually. And that the problem with automation is that the process can become fixed and ossified, right? And
Yeah,
actually it's important
sure.
to keep humans to some extent still involved to keep the thing evolving, because at least right now, the level of automation isn't allowing these systems or processes to sort of self-evolve, right?
Yeah, and there's a different types of automation of processes. I mean, you have like big manufacturing processes, which are obviously heavy duty things that if you change one piece of it, it's going to be a big deal. So it does tend to calcify in that way. But if you have something that's very quick and agile, like how you produce this show, you invite guests, you bring people on, you do some audio editing that goes through like that's a process itself, and there's dozens of processes like that inside every organization. And if you give humans the tools they need to work with a machine and quickly develop a process for those things and let it be automated, let things go off, then they have a lot of more freedom to do other things. So I agree that you have to be careful about pushing too much automation and making it too hard and structured, but you also want a system that's easy for people to use and doesn't require a highly paid programmer to come in and change one little thing about it.
Right, right. So that's AI, and then on the flip side of it, then this being better humans. What are the themes that emerge there within that umbrella from the show?
Yeah, I mean, one theme is productivity. So yeah, AI is kind of like the looming threat out there that it's coming. But along with AI, we also have to realize we have to get better at working with computers, with machines, and understanding our place and what we're bringing, what the value that we bring as humans, which really comes down to the point of the show is what is the value that humans have, and how can we continue to double down on that instead of trying to mimic machines, which is and the topic of productivity is a big one because in a lot of ways, when we talk about being more efficient, being more productive, we use the same terms that we do with machines in a lot of ways. Um, so we have to find a way that in my personal life, in my personal work life, how am I being more productive each day? I'm the kind of guy that if my wife asks me at the end of the day, like, how was your day? Like immediately my thought is, how many tasks did I get done? That's how I judge it. I'm just wired that way. Um, and that's a good thing in some ways, in that I'm always trying to make sure I get the big things done, and I get depressed if my schedule is taken over by someone else. So we talk a lot about time management stuff and different things about that. But at the same time, I don't want to turn into a machine myself. That yeah, I wrote 4 articles today and I got 3 podcasts done and different things like that, because eventually a lot of these things you can pass over to a machine anyway. So chasing efficiency is not always the best route to go through. We have to have time to step back and be unproductive and be bored. We talked about on an episode. Just sit back, do nothing for a while, be unproductive, and see where that leads you, because that's often where our best ideas come from. So understanding the role of leisure in a human experience and how that actually propels you to better thoughts. That's a big topic that we like to think through and talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, I was reading just yesterday, I think, that somebody talking about Darwin's schedule, right, when he was writing, and he
Mm.
he's famous for Origin of Species, but of course he wrote a multitude of books. And he'd like get down to his office at 8 a.m, do a few hours, then he'd check his mail, then he'd have lunch, have a
Yeah.
nap, a few hours in the afternoon, and then it was kind of, it's time for tea, right?
Yeah.
And the guy was a powerhouse. So yeah, it's fascinating that the sort of almost a fetishization of productivity we have, in culture today, right?
Yeah, we're forced to in some ways just because of, social media propels that, but then also all the notifications we get. I mean, we live in these digital workplaces that constantly pinging us with messages, notifications. Your phone is on, you're getting messages from people at work. Everything's coming through. So you have this kind of fake feeling of being productive, but really it's just a lot of chatter, a lot of noise that's around you. And so to really be able to block out those things and recognize that, when you're doing your email, it's like somebody, if you spend 4 hours in your inbox every day, that's the equivalent of like just standing out by your mailbox and just sitting there for 4 hours and just like rummaging through mail that's coming through and saying, okay, I don't want this, I want this, and then writing a letter to somebody else and sending it back. Like, that's not work. That's just talking and communication and really wasting your time. So we talked to one guy that was all about distractions, about digital distractions that are all around us and how to get around those things. So trying to get back to what Darwin did, those types of things, like that's essential to being a good human, to recognize that there are times for work and there are times for just kind of sitting around, sipping your tea and enjoying that too.
Yeah. And there's been it's also some studies it was one of the big management consultancies where they looked at productivity and beyond us 40, it was, I think 40 or 50 hours. Basically, they discovered that all of that extra, work was purely performative. It was just about showing a good face to the bosses and the teams that work the hard. There was no correlation after a certain point between hard work and ultimate productivity and performance.
Yeah, I find that in my own life. Like once I hit about 6 or 7 hours, like anything I do after that point is worthless. Like I may as well just stop. So I need to stop, get outside, see other people interact, and not think about work until later. So that's important.
And given all that, then what have been the big personal shifts that you've made in how you sort of manage your day? And
Recently, one of the cool things I started doing was, so I work remotely. I work with a team that's mostly based in India. Because of that, my day starts really early. So I'm up by 5 at least. In the wintertime, sometimes earlier. But I I have a lot of meetings. There's a lot of chatter that goes back and forth that's there. But a lot of times I found that if I have a little bit of personal work time and then going into meetings and coming back and forth was really difficult. So what we did as a team was we grouped all of our meetings just onto to 3 days that was there. And then Mondays and Thursdays were totally free of meetings. So that helps me a lot to look at my schedule on a Monday and there's nothing on there. So it's just my time to work and to get things done. So that's been really helpful. And then on days when I have a lot of meetings, like I'm not expecting to get other tasks done. So I can just kind of relax in that, not expect so much for myself. So that's a good one. And then I always try to start the day with something important. Writing is kind of like one of my core things that I do. So I always spend the first 30 minutes just doing some kind of writing to push a project along. So those are two things that help me a lot.
Great. Yeah. And I also really resonate with the no notifications. One of my guests written a book called Brain Chains and talks about, how we kind of hooked into all these devices. And he really urged me to just total notification purge. And it really transformed my life.
Nothing, absolutely.
Nothing things now. Yeah. So productivity has been a theme in terms of being a better human and maybe not majorly playing on that. What else has come up?
One of the surprising ones was diversity and inclusion that came up as a big thing. Part of it was just we found people who really wanted to talk about that, and those people happened to be very generous with their network, suggesting other people we should talk to and talk through things. So I feel like over the last year of talking to these people, of realizing how as much damage as some things that we'll talk about later in terms of management and command and control type styles did, the stuff with diversity and inclusion when it comes to race, gender, sexuality, class background, these are big deals, and we've really screwed this up in the last, I don't know, 1,000 years, of really allowing um, white supremacy, of male dominated cultures, of really repressing and putting down other groups to really just go wild and really not let that be in check. And so that's become a passion of ours as a team. It's interesting, like I said, I work with people in India, and for them to interact with a lot of these things, they have different issues than we do in the U.S. So it's fun because most of our guests are either U.S. or U.K. based. So we're often talking about regional issues that are important for us, but then for them in India to reflect about these things and see how it plays out in their own life too. It has been really good for all of us to just be a lot more aware of what's going on in the world. So that's been a big thing that I find myself just in my own personal reading. Like that's where I'm drawn to is learning more about this, trying to see things from other people's perspective and why it's been such an issue in the past.
Right. And so if we accept that all of these issues exist, what have been the approaches that have emerged in terms of dealing with it, right?
I mean, a lot of it is just starting off and admitting that the system's rigged for people like us, white guys, that come from decent backgrounds, and recognizing that we have opportunities that nobody else has, and we have assumptions we can make about work that other people can't make, and really trying to say that nothing will change until people with the power start to leverage it for others, to be an ally for others, to start to give away that power. And a lot of my social situations, one thing I've been doing recently is just trying to find ways to not be in charge of things. When people ask me to speak, to not speak and to just listen and invite somebody else to come up. Just to recognize that there's been a lot of damage and hurt that's gone on in those situations. Like I said, from all aspects, gender and race and sexuality and class and many other ways too. Um, but it's hard when you've grown up with that, when you're used to that, when everything about you has been affirming what you are and that you work just as hard as everybody else. But then to hear other people's stories and recognize that it's just not true, and to really be open to those things has been impactful. So yeah, for me, that practically just means finding ways to give up power, finding ways to affirm the women in the companies I work with, the people of color in companies I work with. When I'm looking for guests, making sure that we're being cognizant of that and making sure that we're getting a diverse background, and not just saying, okay, here's a black guy, so let's put him on the diversity show. But no, he probably has something to say about leadership too that we should listen to. And here's a lesbian woman. That doesn't mean she can only talk about diversity. That means she probably has something good to say about productivity too. So being able to open up those doors and just listen to people and acknowledge that they have a different background, but we should still be open to them.
Right. Right. And yeah, I mean, this is always feels like a debate to sort of tread carefully into.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly some of the counter sort of points I've read on some of this is that, for example, East Asians in America tend to, outperform whites. And so have you discovered that it's, for you, is it just about sticking to race? Is it just about whites, or is it particular groups, or, where have you got to with that?
I mean, I focus on thinking about whites as a group just because that's the culture I come from. That's where I am. In terms of Asians, I work with Indians a lot. I don't have a lot of experience with people from China and Japan. So that's less. We haven't had a lot of guests from there either. So it's been less something we've interacted with. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where we head, just because that's where we see the issues being right now and something we can do something about. So yeah, that's where I would say.
Right. Okay. But for you, it's about being cognizant of where you're using your power and your it's about, what is it about? It's trying to being conscious of that and giving power to others in a conscious way when you're interacting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Recognizing that as a man, as a white man, I'm going to get asked to speak. I have inherent power in that. I have the ability to step into situations, and for someone to kind of say, okay, you lead this, or you get the last word in the meeting, or different things like that. And being willing to step out of that and to share it with others. If I'm looking for someone to mentor in my company, that I can be a little bit more specific about saying, yeah, I do have connections and I do have power because I can jump into conferences and networking meetings and get advantages in different places. So can I offer those? Can I leverage those to somebody else? If there's a young uh, woman working in my office that I really think has a great potential, do I want to make sure that she has those opportunities to step into those same meetings as I do? So yeah, just being aware at this point, recognizing those things, and also trying to name things. I feel like that's really powerful, to call things when there is some kind of discrimination happening, when there is some kind of racist comment or sexist comment being made, just to speak up about those things. That's probably the hardest thing, because that's threatening to other people around you, and you don't want to hurt other people's feelings, or worry about your status in those things. So that becomes an issue, I think.
Right. And have you had specific instances in your life then when you have experienced racist comments being made, sexist comments being made?
I have a ton of instances where somebody said something that I didn't say something about.
Yeah.
I'm on a learning phase of actually speaking up about those things, because I mean, we're taught not to say anything about it. Um, but again, I think it comes back to, I mean, being human, being a good human. If we're gonna get to a better future of work, we got to do it together. We have to acknowledge that we've got some messiness, some ugliness in our past as a species, which includes everybody, and to try to, we're not going to fix everything, but just be aware of it and not to be blind to it as we move forward to the future, and make sure that the future we're building is good for everybody, not just good for the people who it's already good for. Because that's honestly, that's where we're at right now. In a lot of ways, I feel like if AI really takes over in a big way, all AI is going to do is cement everything that's true now, all of our values, all of our the equality that we have. Basically, everything gets frozen at this moment. And do we have the kind of society right now that we want to perpetuate for the next 100 years? For me, I would say no. I don't feel like we're there yet. I feel like we're still at a place where people with my background have tons more advantages, and if we just let that play out, then that's not building a better future. So I think for me, that's the impetus, and why this is an important topic for us, is that to really build that better future has to include everybody, and it has to rework some of those advantages.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think when you brought it back to situations where you hear someone being racist, I can empathize with that. I remember a car journey back from a men's weekend once, and there was 5 of us in the car, and one of the guy was making racist comments, not really racist jokes. It was just straight up racism, right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I sat in the car, all kind of older than me, and I came out of the car and kind of felt really awkward and like a bit dirty almost, and like, oh God, I didn't say, and yeah, and I mean, I have to say those incidents have been rare in my life, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of rubber hits the road with this conversation, is it? We can talk about, the sort of economic inequality and privilege and all of these terms, but it's actually those moments in life, isn't it, where these things actually kind of viscerally impact.
Yeah, and it's helped me. The one book I'm reading right now called White Fragility, by Robin DiAngelo, has been really good for me, and other books as well. But just to see, like, yeah, everyone has maybe a story like that where they got an uncle or they got a friend that's saying something like that, and we feel kind of awkward about it. But the point that a lot of these other speakers and authors make is that, look, the whole system's baked in to benefit white men for the most part, at least from my culture. So we can't just say, hey, that was one racist comment I've heard. When you live in a system that at least from the outside, looks like it's built to discriminate against other people and doesn't give people equal advantage, you know. So that's been helpful for me to recognize that it's bigger than just it is those comments, like you said, that is where the rubber hits the road. We have to be able to call those things out, but we also have to call out when I look around my neighborhood, which is a well-off neighborhood, and there's just white families around here. Like something happened to cause that. It's not just like it just naturally occurred like that. So being able to see those things too.
Right, right. Yeah, but when you get into that's yeah, that becomes a sort of, certainly for me, it becomes a much more abstract conversation.
Sure.
But it feels to me like the having that courage in the moment to call out and say, "Hey, I'm not okay with that comment." That's,
Yeah.
I think, for a lot of individuals, certainly for me, I don't know, it's true for other, that feels to me like that's where the biggest growth opportunity for me in terms of evolving myself is, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. And that's where, you know, we we can do that. Like that's a goal for me, I guess, in this next year is to really be able to be comfortable with that and be willing to lose relationships even. Like if I did that in a group of guys, like there's a good chance that one or two of them like wouldn't invite me to the next weekend. Um, because hey, you're the guy that always talks about race. Um, but you know, that's the other advantage is I can go find other friends that's like that too. So it is tough.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've talked productivity, we've talked inclusion, diversity. Yeah, what else? What else emerge on this being a better human?
I think we use the term human leadership as a topic, which you know there's so much written about leadership. It's out there everywhere. But when it comes down to the fact of like in the future, the work that's assigned to you will probably be given by a system of some point. Um, a lot of the major policy decisions will likely be determined by AI to some extent. So when all these things start moving over to systems, like what is it that I need a human to lead me in? How does that work? So recognizing the core roles that humans play in leading each other and inspiring and giving hope and giving vision. Um, we wrote an article about imagine a group of robots sitting around and they need to make a hire and they decide to hire a human for a certain role. Like what role is that? What is it that robots find very valuable about what humans can do for each other? Um, in terms of being empathetic, of understanding where systems are coming from and understanding how to lead them in new places. So a lot of the guests we invite on, they talk about just the idea of management in general came about because we had all these machines in the industrial age, and we had to hire all these workers, and those workers were dumb and stupid, and so we had to put people in charge of them to make sure that they were less dumb and stupid and did what they were supposed to do. um, and that kind of got transferred over to the office knowledge worker environment, to say, hey, I got all these people, I got all these software engineers, they're all dumb, they don't know what they're doing, so I need to hire somebody to put in charge of them, to tell them what to do and to tell them how to do it. And no one actively thought that when it was happening, but the system that we inherited was built for that. We had a guy named David Marquet come on. He was a submarine commander. It was
Oh,
really
I love
interesting.
his book. Yeah, Turn the
Yeah,
Ship Around. What an awesome
yeah.
book. I feel well done for getting him.
It was just really powerful to think about the fact of like, here's the most hierarchical organization in the world, probably in terms of the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy, and yet he recognized pretty early on that like if I'm in charge and I'm making all the decisions, like we will fail. Like this is not going to work. So really trying to turn it around and say, okay, how can we distribute decision making? How can we be better as a team? And so his thoughts were really impactful to me to really see kind of how we can make leadership better in that way.
Right. So distributing decision making, anything else that comes up in terms of making leadership better?
A lot of it comes into like where are we going in the future? What's the vision that looks like robots will be great at forecasting numbers and saying, okay, we produce this many widgets this quarter, we should be producing this many widgets next quarter. Like I don't need a human to tell me that. But I do need a human to say, okay, this is where we are as a company. These are the products we're making now. Um, it's likely that we'll be going this way, or we need to shift this way, or we need to think about this thing, or notice something new, because I think, you know, humans, we naturally find trends, we find patterns. We had Beth Comstock come on, who has a great book about imagination, about the need to not be productive. So being able to see those things out in the future and realize, hey, there's a pattern coming that a robot can't identify yet. Humans are great at finding those patterns and then teaching the robots, but robots can't find the patterns on their own, the new ones that don't exist yet. So I feel like that's a big element of leadership, is being able to inspire and find the patterns and to lead people into vision. But there's also just the element of empathy, sitting down, listening to somebody, hearing what they're going through, understanding it, being a genuine listener, because that's something that management has been taught not to do. The workers are supposed to listen to the managers. That's the way it's set up. But in a true human team, it's the manager that needs to be listening to the people that are closest to the problem, the people that are interacting with the issues. So making a shift on that level too, I think, is an important change in how we be better humans as leaders.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my last guest actually was talking about belonging, Devin Halliday, and he was making precisely that point about the importance of listening to other stories as a leader, listening to the stories of the people in your team, and then pulling out of that the values inherent in those stories, sharing them around, opening up dialogue, engaging. So, yeah, a very different set of skills, characteristics than we might normally associate with the leader.
Yeah, exactly. I think the role of the leader will be more specialized in the future. Like you will hire, like right now, people become a manager because they're good at their job. And if you're good at doing your job, then you can probably teach others how to do that job and manage other people. Like that's pretty much the qualification to become a manager. But I feel like, at least my hope is that in the future, the actual role of manager or leader or whatever that ends up being called is someone who's just genuinely good at connecting with people, and that's their core specialty. And they can really use that as leverage in a company to do what they need to do, and everyone else gets hired to do a specific job, and some people just have that training and knowing exactly how to lead other people.
Right. You said something there which I found interesting. So there's this view that humans are good at finding spotting patterns, but presumably the AI also has to be good at spotting patterns if it's going to forecast future sales of widgets. So is there a different class of patterns that humans are likely to be particularly good at?
Yeah, and I'm not an AI expert, so I may be totally off on this, but my perception is that AI is fantastic at spotting patterns when you teach it what the pattern is. So if I give an AI machine a million photographs and I teach it over and over again which ones are dogs, like which ones look like dogs. After I teach it, maybe 1,000 images of dogs, then it can do it forever. It's always going to pick the dog, and it's going to be great at it, and it's going to spot that pattern, and it's going to identify when something kind of looks like a dog or doesn't quite look like a dog. But if I were to tell that AI machine, like, I want you to find a pattern, to find, some new species that I think is out there but doesn't quite exist. Like it doesn't deal well with that kind of fuzziness, of saying it's going to ask you, okay, teach me how to do that, and I can do it. The machine learning aspect of it is still in the sense of, like, you have to teach it what the pattern is, or teach it many different patterns in the past to be able to spot those things, and then it can do it. But whereas humans, we come up with new patterns all the time. We make connections that haven't been made before, when we're at our best self, which is another thing I feel like we need to get better at, is to exist and saying, yeah, these patterns have been there, but here's a new one. Here's a new trend that's there. So you see things like, the people who make Spotify playlists, like they're spotting patterns. They're finding things. Now, eventually, you can teach what somebody's doing there to a system, probably, but it's very difficult, and it's going to be harder. And then those people will go on to to spot new patterns and find new things and find new ways to bring in ideas. I think fashion is always going to be something that it's going to be difficult for um, AI as a whole to surpass humans. I think I can see a future where it's possible, but I feel like it's going to be difficult to match their ability to see patterns and to create trends and to find those things. So that's the distinction for me.
Right. Right. Well, it actually ties into somebody writing more at the dystopian level of AI and talking about that AI will continue to automate sort of low IQ, if you like, activities, and it will only be the sort of the very high IQ type uh, activities where precisely this pattern pattern spotting ability is going to be important. That will still have a role in the workplace, and we'll actually continue this problem of inequality because it will really be the super intelligent who will be able to engage productively in the economy. Have you had anybody put that case on the podcast, or have you heard that argument?
You know what? I actually had almost the opposite thing in terms of how we classify jobs. I had a guy named Byron Reese, who is the editor for GigaOM. Um, we talked about like what jobs would likely be automated and what jobs would likely not be automated. And he thought that one of the safest jobs out there in terms of no automation is going to come that way was a plumber. He said the amount of specification for somebody to walk into a house or a building or an office building and figure out what's wrong, to analyze that based on all the different things that have ever gone wrong, to use that person's experience that they've ever learned, like that's a highly specialized field and not something that's every day is different. Every day's, I mean, they're always working with pipes and water, but every situation they walk into is a different situation. Or somebody who's a carpenter, somebody who builds things, somebody who's a welder. Often the level of newness in their work is so fresh each day that it's very unlikely that it's even cost effective to build an AI machine that can do the jobs that those people are doing. So from his perspective, office work will be gone long before that type of work will be going. So it really brings another viewpoint into, what are these intelligent tasks that are out there. And a lot of it's just our fault as a society that we turned and we said, okay, these are kind of low level jobs. If you can't get into a good college, you can go to a trade school and be there. So we've attached that stigma onto those types of jobs, which doesn't need to be there. We can still look at those jobs as very valuable and very rewarding, and jobs that really require some element of unique human ability to do well.
Right. Well, yeah, that's yeah. I'd actually read that as well, and therapists were likely to survive for a while at least.
Yeah, and until we get tired of listening to each other, and then I think that's one area I can actually see an AI machine that, and I think I've read experiments where it's just they're kind of feeding back the information back to somebody, even at a low level AI, where it's just kind of repeating the answer somebody gave them and said, "What do you think about that?" And people found that very effective in some ways. So yeah, it's always dangerous to say, yeah, this job will never be taken over by AI, but there are some that will go faster than others for sure.
Okay. So we've talked about leadership, we've talked about inclusion and diversity, we've talked about productivity.
Yeah, another one for us is workplaces, because where we work has changed so much. We have people like me who do remote work from our home, and we also have people who are still co-located. We still have big buildings where people go and work. We have co-working spaces where people from different organizations are together. So we have the physical nature of it. You have the whole open office phenomenon that has taken over and says, okay, how many people can we cram into a room? But then, so we've got rid of cubicles. We have that physical office space, but we also have the digital office space we have to think about. What does it look like when I log in? What tools am I using? How are those tools being distracting me? How are they helping me? What are the core tools we need to kind of build in those skills? So that's a big topic, I feel like, to really analyze what are the, if you just kind of wipe the slate clean. What's the best way for us to physically work? What type of setup do we need for that? And what's the best way for us to digitally work? Like, what are the tools that I need to be able to create my own processes, to create my own task lists, to collaborate? Because we kind of got used to a digital workplace became email and Microsoft Office for a long time. It was Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and those were the tools you needed. But then, okay, email became so powerful and became so strong, and everything was email, and everything was about email. And we started to be able to do everything in your email client. But then that broke down, and we realized that was not helping anyone. And now we're in this stage where it's like you have apps for everything. You have 20 apps you have to log into every day just to get your work done, because everything's located on different places. So as those tools start to consolidate again, what's the best match? What's the best packaging to be able to create a good digital workplace where people feel good about it, and not just that they're bombarded with notifications and messages. Like Slack, I love a lot of it, but I can't stand it for too long. I have to take breaks from it and turn off my notifications and stop listening to things, or else it's just chatter so much. So all these tools we need to think deeply about and figure out how to use better.
Right. And so you're managing your Slack relationship. Is there anything else you've sort of discovered in your digital office, your setup, that's really working for you?
So we as a team, most of what we do, and we talked about processes, like we use a tool called KissFlow that lets me as not a programmer create my own automated processes and kind of manual processes, which would be like more project management type things. And it's unique because it builds those on the same platform. I don't have to log out of one system and log into another one, and everyone knows where it's going to be. Or if I want to have a collaboration discussion about something. So that's a tool. It's a new one out there, so we're still kind of learning it and figuring out how to apply it to what we're doing. But I found like that's been effective. I feel like it's been effective for me to treat email like an actual postal box. So if I'm doing external mails to other people that are not part of my company, like then I'll use email. Otherwise, if somebody sends me an email from my company, I won't respond to it. I'll get on a different platform and try to interact with them there. So that's been helpful to try to move away from those platforms and onto ones that are more effective.
Right. Yeah, I've got a friend actually who's kind of on no email. You get her, she's got an autoresponder and says, "Hey,
I was talking to somebody and they said that there's a company that whenever you went on vacation, like the company had an autoresponder that went on and said like, Richard is out of the office. He's not responding to emails. He will not get this one. If you need to get in touch with him, this is the day he'll be back. You can contact him then. Like, it wasn't like I'll review these emails. It's just like, this email is not going to be read by anyone. So good luck. I liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah. Oh, there's a no email at all, right? There's a famous guy, John Cardwell in the UK, who set up a big network of cell phone stores, and he banned email completely.
Yeah.
Got to get on the phone, baby.
Yeah, that's the thing. We talked about even before the show is that actually talking with people is a lost art. I had a manager for a long time that her mantra all the time was pick up the phone, like talk to that person. If there's any issue, like do not send them a message, do not send them an email, do not come to me and tell me that they didn't reply to your email. She wouldn't accept that. She just said, get on the phone, call them up, talk to them. And it was really good advice. And I've kept that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So work minus. What's the sort of big vision with the podcast? What are your big plans for it? Where are you going to take it, do you think?
I mean, we'd love to just keep expanding it to. I mean, the way I'm seeing it now is trying to be like a toolkit for managers, team leaders who are moving into the future and say, okay, what's the minimum? What are the topics I need to be conversant about? I feel like it's like this should be like an MBA program of somebody who's going to be in a leadership position going into the future. They need to be conversant about all these things to know how to be productive, how to set up your office culture to be positive, how to be inclusive of people around you, how to lead people. So I feel like it's almost those essentials. We're going to keep interviewing people. We're writing a lot of articles right now. So that's been a big theme for us, is just trying to put more out there in terms of content. I'd love to see us get to the place where we can actually, live out what we're saying in terms of being better humans. And one of those things is getting together physically in the same place. So having events, local events where people can just kind of connect and share about what they're learning and what they're bringing in. So that's kind of the bigger vision for me, is actual local events where people are connecting.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, or do you feel like it feels to me like you've given us a good kind of tour of what you've learned?
Yeah, no, I've preached my sermon. You've heard everything from me. So I think that's all. Workminus.com is where we are. We try to be active on other channels, mostly LinkedIn. But yeah, check it out. And if anybody, we also kind of have a private platform where if people are really wanting to get deeper into these things, that we host those discussions for people to share their ideas and things on. So if they're interested in that, they can get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Neil, for your time. Been an honor. Yeah, it's you've certainly particularly helped me with the AI conversation, starting to draw those distinctions between where that it'll play a role versus human, or at least the best we can predict it. So,
yeah, and I feel like for me that's the big thing. Without the AI piece, all this is just like, yeah, it's a little altruistic, like let's be better, let's do things better. But for me, it's like, no, this is important. Like we have to do this, or else we're not gonna make it. So yeah, thanks for bringing me on. I had a fun time.
Good. Thank you, Neil. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again. See you.
You too.